You're listening to the Connection Care Community Podcast, a podcast designed to help you understand your body more deeply and feel more confident navigating your hormones, cycle, and fertility. Each episode offers grounded, research-informed guidance and integrative tools to support hormone health, embodied awareness, and informed choice. If you're seeking clarity, connection, and a more trusting relationship with your body, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Here's your host, the founder of Connection Care Therapy, Majida.
Hello, and welcome to the Connection Care Community Podcast. My name is Majida, and this week we'll be talking about irregular cycles. More specifically, how fertility awareness can still work for you if you're navigating irregular cycles, whether that's due to PCOS or endometriosis or coming off the pill. That charting isn't just possible, it's actually one of the most powerful tools that you can use. So I've heard this question more times than I can count. My cycles are too irregular for fertility awareness to work for me, right? And maybe you have been told that with PCOS, charting is impossible, or maybe endometriosis has turned your symptoms into something of a puzzle. Maybe your cycles have vanished completely after years of being on hormonal contraceptives, or maybe stress has thrown everything off and you're not even sure what cycle day you're on anymore. So when your cycle doesn't follow a neat pattern, it makes sense to wonder if a tool like fertility awareness can actually help you. And I am here to say that the answer is absolutely yes. So fertility awareness works with the cycles that you have. What most people don't understand is fertility awareness does not require you to have regular cycles. It requires your cycle, the one that is happening for you right now, whether it's irregular or not. Fertility awareness, because it's not based on predictions or averages or an app giving you fertile window guesses, it doesn't rely on outdated data that healthy cycles are always 28 days. That is a common myth. Most people's cycles are some kind of variation, right? Between healthy cycles between anywhere to 24, 25 days up into 30 or so days. This 28-day typical cycle is just that. It's used for textbook cycles, not for what we as real people who are menstruating are navigating in real time. So fertility awareness takes that into account. It's built on real-time biology, your real-time biology, observing your signs, your actual signs, not theoretical ones, learning how your body expresses hormonal shifts, making decisions based on real data, not calendar math. Regularity is not a prerequisite for fertility awareness. Awareness is. And here's the shift that I really want to invite you into making. Quote unquote irregular isn't a liability. It's information. If you've been listening to this podcast, you'll oftentimes hear me refer to this concept, right? The things that we have been told are our bodies are malfunctioning or behaving improperly or not doing the right thing or the typical thing. Instead of framing that as this is something that is wrong with me, I invite you to frame that what you're experiencing is information about what is going on with your body and actually clues as to how you may be able to support yourself in coming back into a space of irregularity. So what does irregular cycles, what does that actually mean? When your cycles are irregular, your chart then becomes a diagnostic lens. What I mean by that is that your chart then becomes a story that your body is trying to tell you long before you even began putting pen to paper. So to give an example, I worked with a client last year who'd been told that she has PCOS, that she would never have regular cycles without medication. Her doctor suggested going back on the pill to quote unquote regulate her cycle. But when we started charting her information, something really interesting emerged. Her cycles weren't random. There was actually a pattern to her cycles. It was just not a 28-day quote unquote typical cycle pattern. Every cycle would start with multiple patches of cervical fluid. Each one would then fail to trigger ovulation. Her temperature would stay low for 40, 50, and sometimes even 60 days before finally showing a sustained shift. Her luteal phases were consistently between 11 to 12 days once ovulation actually happened. So what I invited her into is this reframe, right? What she was seeing in her cycles weren't chaos, at least not the kind that she needed to fear. This was her body struggling to build enough estrogen to trigger ovulation, likely due to insulin resistance and chronic stress. So once we began to address those root causes, right, through nutrition, through blood sugar management and regulation, through supporting her nervous system, her follicular phase started to shorten. We also integrated some workout and movement into her daily routine. And what she noticed is that ovulation started to happen more regularly, right? Her quote unquote irregular cycles eventually moved into a 32 to 35 day rhythm that was consistent for her body. So this was major for this client, as you can imagine, and for other clients that I've worked with who have experienced similar things. Once they start to chart and they start to pinpoint what could actually be going on with their body, because your chart can reveal all kinds of information, right? To go through some of the things that your chart can actually reveal about you and your specific body. Ovulatory dysfunction or anovulation, right? Meaning that ovulation is not occurring. When we see multiple fluid patches without temperature shifts happening, long follicular phases, or we're seeing the patches of cervical fluid show up, but we're not seeing a person actually have the temp shift to demonstrate that ovulation is occurring. This tells us that they are experiencing anovulatory cycles. May be able to see insulin resistance or blood sugar dysregulation in a chart. What this shows up as is oftentimes difficulty reaching ovulation, shorter luteal phases. Once the blood sugar is stabilized, then we see cycles begin to regulate. Chronic stress or HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis depletion. We can oftentimes see that through some charting data, and that might show up as delayed ovulation, low temps throughout the cycle, or what we call bouncy temps in the follicular phase, minimal progesterone after ovulation. Those may all be signs that chronic stress is one of the root causes. If someone is coming off of hormonal contraceptives, post-pill suppression, or nutrient depletion, that can oftentimes lead to absent or scant cervical fluid and ovulatory cycles, again meaning cycles where you're not ovulating, lower basal body temperatures. Endometriosis is something that through charting we may be able to see, at least have indications of, for you to then go and actually have that specifically checked out. Oftentimes estrogen dominance, like prolonged cervical fluid or cervical mucus production during the follicular phase, heavy bleeding, short luteal phases. Especially for those who are in trying to conceive, this becomes really big information when we're talking about luteal phase defects or progesterone insufficiency. Oftentimes that shows up on the chart in the luteal phase when we fail to have sustained temperature rises or weak temperature rises, or a luteal phase that lasts fewer than 10 days, or spotting, extended spotting before menstruation. Estrogen dominance, which can lead to all kinds of things. We may be able to see that earlier in a chart, right? Earlier than a person may be able to pinpoint if they're just seeking their, once a year annual, for example. And estrogen dominance oftentimes shows up through extended follicular phases or heavy bleeding, PMS type symptoms that start well before menstruation. So this is the part that most people don't hear when we're talking about irregular cycles. Irregular cycles aren't the problem that you need to fix before you start to chart. Charting is actually how you understand why your cycles are irregular in the first place. Fertility awareness isn't some kind of a reward you get for having balanced hormones. No, it's actually a tool that can support you in balancing your hormones and balancing your system. So, some clinical values of charting with irregular cycles. And I have a much more robust write-up on this section in my Substack. So I invite you to head on over to my Substack if you'd like much more of a deep dive into this section and what I'm about to share. But I'd like to give you some specific examples of how charting irregular cycles has changed some of my clients' health trajectories. So I have a client, several clients actually. I work with people who are navigating PCOS quite a bit, and their ovulatory patterns. So one client says that she never ovulates, but what her chart was actually showing was that she was ovulating. She just was ovulating irregularly, sometimes on day 45 or sometimes on cycle day 60. And so this client charting, you can imagine, actually realizing that she's ovulating and that her system needed a level of support so that she was ovulating more regularly. And eventually we were able to bring her cycles down to between 35 to 40 days. Post-pill recovery, something that I've talked a lot about in my Life After Hormonal Birth Control series. Cycles can oftentimes disappear post-pill, and charting can support in telling you exactly when your body is producing the hormones again for you to start ovulating again. And so I oftentimes see this with clients that they are actually witnessing their HPO, their hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, wake up in real time, and that data really supports them. And their practitioners, if they're working with a functional medical doctor, for example, it really supports them in understanding whether their recovery is progressing, right? The things that are happening are progressing, or whether or not it's stalling. Distinguishing between anovulatory and ovulatory cycles. There are many people with irregular cycles that just assume that they're not ovulating at all, and the information that they're able to see through their chart can make it really clear, right, and really support practitioners like myself or others that they may be working with in structuring a clear plan of support to assist their cycles in becoming more robust. And then tracking the impact of interventions. If you're taking supplements for PCOS, or you're seed cycling, or you're working with a functional practitioner on thyroid health, right? We can actually have data on you to see what is working and what is not, right? Are your temperature patterns becoming more robust, or is your luteal phase strengthening? This is real-time feedback that is beyond valuable. So one of my favorite experiences in doing this kind of work is watching the realizations that happen when someone who has had irregular cycles begins to chart and begins to understand that their body has been communicating with them this whole time, right? And that coming from a place of curiosity instead of judgment, connection, right, as opposed to discouragement, that coming from this place, real healing can really begin. So I had another client who sent me a message that I think encapsulates this perfectly. This client said, "Holy shit, I think I'm beginning to get it 4 months into this. I think I'm actually beginning to understand what my body is trying to do." So this is integrated fertility awareness. Right? It's relationship building with your body, not just tracking your cycle, not just collecting data, but actually forming a relationship and understanding your individual body, creating that level of intimacy with yourself and what's happening with you. So how to chart irregular cycles. The method does matter. Not all fertility awareness methods work equally well for irregular cycles. Some methods would rely heavily on calendar calculations or historical data, which is, of course, going to fall apart when your cycles are varying in length. And it can also be a very frustrating experience if your cycles have a lot of variation. What I invite you to explore is the method that I teach. It's called the symptothermal method, which combines both cervical fluid observations with basal body temperature tracking. I have, from my point of view, and in the years and years that I've been doing this and teaching this work, having both methods is really the most ideal for those navigating irregular cycles, because it works with your current signs, right? Not past patterns or not expected patterns. Generally, the data that you're able to collect about yourself, right? Cervical fluid, basal body temperature, cervical position, optionally cervical position, but the two big ones, cervical fluid, basal body temperature. That current data is really what is going to be the most reliable, the most support you the most on the individual level. And so just as a bit of a review, in case anyone is new to what fertility awareness tracking looks like, you'll have cervical fluid is one of the main signs. We oftentimes refer to it as your primary fertility sign. It's when you see fertile qualities, cervical fluid show up, you know that estrogen is rising and then ovulation is nearby. And then when that fluid dries up, you see a clearing pattern, and you can oftentimes, with the other biomarker, basal body temperature, that we'll talk about to confirm ovulation has occurred, but the drying up pattern of cervical fluid would be part of showing that. And then the second big biomarker that we talk about is basal body temperature, which confirms ovulation retrospectively. So that's after ovulation has occurred. Progesterone rises, sustained progesterone causes your body to heat up, sustained temperatures rise and hold for a duration, and that gives you information about your luteal phase, the second part of your cycle, telling you that ovulation has happened and has passed. And then for some, they might also integrate what's called cervical position technique, which adds another bit of information. And the short of that is that when your cervix actually responds to hormones throughout your cycle. So when your cervix moves higher, softens, opens, then oftentimes that can be an indication that ovulation is approaching, versus when it's lower, firmer, and closed. And so those are all techniques that a trained fertility awareness educator like myself can be a big support in helping you navigate if you have any questions on. And I also have a course called Cycle Connection that you can tap into if you want to learn more about these techniques. And so some tips with irregular cycles, some things that you may see. Oftentimes I'll see with my clients' charts that cervical fluid is appearing and disappearing multiple times before ovulation, saying that ovulation is trying to happen but not quite getting there. We may see long stretches of nothing between cervical fluid patches, and temperature may stay low for weeks, and we never see that temp shift, that bump up. All of this, I want to reiterate, is useful data. It's showing you what your hormones are doing in real time, and this is really, really powerful information to support you in your cycle becoming more regular again, telling us what supports your system needs in order for your cycles to become regular again. So, common irregular patterns, what they mean. In case you are currently charting, some things that you may see in your chart, and just giving you a bit of tips as to what they can mean. You may see the long follicular phase, as we've talked about, that first part of your cycle, from the start of menstruation to ovulation is your follicular phase, and then you see a normal luteal phase. And again, this means that your body is taking some time to build enough estrogen to trigger ovulation, but once it does, your progesterone production may be adequate. If you'd like to know what I give, the tips that I give as to what you are looking at focusing on, if this is your pattern, head on over to my Substack, and you can see some tips that I write out, some focus areas I have written out for you to tap into if you're charting your cycle and this is your pattern. Another pattern that I oftentimes see with irregular cycles is that someone may have a normal follicular phase, but then a short luteal phase. So this means that ovulation is happening within a reasonable time frame, but the progesterone side, the luteal side, the second phase of your cycle is insufficient. And that oftentimes we'll see a luteal phase is fewer than 10 days, right? Anovulatory cycles, when we may see some fluid patterns, but we never get that sustained temperature shift, which means that ovulation is not occurring. And another pattern that people see, that I've seen in working with people who are navigating irregular cycles, erratic temperatures with normal cervical fluid. What this could look like, you have fluid patterns, right, that are clear, but your temperatures are looking like they're all over the place. And there are some specific reasons why that may be happening with you. So again, head on over to my Substack to get more information about what your area of focus would be if that is your cycle pattern. So where to start if irregular cycles feel overwhelming? If you're ready to start exploring your cycle with a little bit more clarity, I offer that you just start tracking. Right? Don't wait for a good cycle or until your hormones are balanced or anything like that. Just go ahead and start, right? Just start with whatever your cycle is doing today. Every piece of every piece of information, had a little bit of something in my throat. Every piece of information that is personal to you matters, right? So, you can use paper charts, and if you're looking for an app, I would recommend the Read Your Body app. But really, for someone who's navigating irregular cycles, a big thing that I offer is having someone on your team who has walked this path with others before and can support you. It's what I do. Come on over and grab a consultation, and let's see how we may be able to work together to support you in understanding what's going on with your cycles. You may consider, and something that we would talk about if we do a consultation together, is what's called functional testing. So functional testing, these are tests that grab information from you that is oftentimes more detailed and more specific than what you would see if you just went to your doctor and got regular blood work drawn, or even if you get blood work drawn from your doctor, a functional practitioner like me is trained to look at that blood work in a more integrative way, so that we can get to the root cause of what may be going on with you. And so some panels that I oftentimes recommend, and you can again go on over to my Substack, or also on my website, I have a whole lab shop there that you can peruse and start to get educated on what these different markers mean, so that when you're talking to your medical practitioner, or if you decide to work with a functional practitioner like myself, that you can have an understanding as to what these panels are and how they may help you grab information to support you in understanding better what's happening with your body. So some that I oftentimes recommend for those navigating irregular cycles: the fasting insulin and glucose, right, panel, or markers, a full comprehensive thyroid panel, big hint, thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. That marker alone is what is usually tested, and that is simply not enough to give us information about your overall thyroid health. There's a lab called the Dutch lab, which it's much more than I can get into in this podcast. I'll likely do podcasts later on what the Dutch lab is, but it's a very comprehensive hormonal pattern, and can be very profound in giving information, supporting you in finding out information about the root as to what is going on with your hormonal health and therefore your irregular cycles. As I said, you can check out my lab shop. If you want to head on over to my Substack, you can click the link that is in my Substack article, or head on over to my website at connectioncaretherapy.com, and you can either search lab shop, and you'll see my entire lab shop there of functional labs. So the foundational pillars, right? While you're charting, I invite you to work on the basics to support your hormonal health. The basics, 4 things. Right? If you can focus on blood sugar balance. What this looks like is quality protein with every meal and avoiding long fasting windows. Sleep and prioritizing sleep. And what that looks like is 7 to 9 hours consistently, right? I had a client recently who was like, yeah, I get fantastic sleep. I get regular sleep. And this client was getting like 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night, right? For some that may work, but if we are seeing information, especially around irregular cycles, is saying that while that may be a comfort zone for you, like you may be comfortable with 4 to 5 hours of sleep, your body is likely screaming for more support, right? So that 7 to 9 hours consistently. Don't sleep on the power of sleep. Stress management, even 10 minutes a day of nervous system regulation practices. What we're talking about is intentional breathing, grounding, time outside, other meditation and relaxation techniques, somatic techniques that I teach to all of my clients. It can make a big difference, even 10 minutes a day. And then looking at your nutrition, right? Quality nutrition. That may look like a focus on your B vitamins and methylated forms, magnesium, zinc, and vitamin D are the big ones that I often recommend starting with. Some resources. I've already mentioned my Cycle Connection course. That is a fantastic place to start if you're looking for wanting to start charting your cycle and are looking for a robust support system. Definitely check out my Cycle Connection course. Of course, if you're seeking one-on-one support, I've mentioned consultations, nutritional support, supplement bundles that I have in my supplement dispensary. You can also find that on my website. And I have supplement bundles for those navigating PCOS, while trying to conceive, those navigating post-pill recovery, and many more, right? As I said, root cause testing, you can check out my lab shop. I have a blog called FAM and Irregular Cycles. It's on FAM and Irregular Cycles, so that's another resource you can tap into. And of course, my Hormone Harmony ebook, which if you go to my website, connectioncaretherapy.com, I have a whole free resource library for you to start your exploration. And the Hormone Harmony ebook is a really great place to start. So we'll close up there today. A final thought is that your cycles do not need to be predictable for them to provide you with deeply meaningful information. Irregular cycles carry just as much information as regular ones, and oftentimes more, because they're asking, your body is calling for you to pay closer attention, to dig a little deeper, and to understand what it is that your body really does need. And so fertility awareness is for you. It's for you just as you are, exactly where you are right now. So with that, I'll close out today. Thank you as always for joining me, and I hope to continue to stay connected. Be sure to reach out if you have any questions. Tap into my Substack and blogs and all of the free resources, and I will see you in the next podcast. All right, stay connected.
That does it for this episode of the Connection Care Community Podcast with Majida. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you're leaving with a fresh perspective on your body and overall well-being, along with practical tools you can integrate into daily life. The support doesn't stop here. Be sure to connect with us online at connectioncaretherapy.com for more resources to guide you on your journey. You can also find us on Substack and connect with Majida on Instagram at Majida Sai'da. Remember to rate, review, and share this podcast. And most importantly, stay connected.